Every man has a moment where he sees it, not in the mirror, but in the way others treat him. The fake smiles, the subtle disrespect, the feeling that people listen to him but don't really hear him. That's when it hits. Something about you feels weak. You don't know when it started, but now you feel it everywhere, in your posture, your voice, your silence. You try harder, you explain more, you stay quiet to keep peace. But it never works, because real strength isn't in effort. It's in presence, and you lost yours the moment you started fearing how others see you. These aren't just mistakes, these are symptoms of a man losing himself, slowly, silently, publicly. And the world doesn't forgive weakness, it feeds on it. This video reveals the hidden behaviors that silently expose weak men, not through words, but through actions. You'll learn how insecurity, avoidance, and fake confidence betray them in everyday life. And most importantly, how to recognize and eliminate these traits from yourself before they destroy your character. He over-explains to be liked. Weak men talk too much, not to share something useful, but to be accepted. They explain every little thing, why they said something, why they did something, why they didn't do more. It's not confidence, it's fear. They're afraid of being judged, misunderstood, or rejected, so they try to explain their way into people's approval. But people can feel it. When someone keeps explaining themselves, it doesn't look strong, it looks needy. It shows that deep down, they don't believe in their own choices. And if a man doesn't trust himself, why would anyone else? This kind of behavior shows up everywhere. In conversations where he repeats himself trying to sound clear. In relationships where he over-apologizes just to avoid conflict. At work where he can't say no without listing 10 reasons. It's not about being helpful, it's about being liked. This kind of man is easy to spot. He can't make a decision without giving a full speech about it. Even in simple situations, he feels the urge to make sure no one misunderstands him, no one thinks badly of him, and no one gets uncomfortable. And the truth is, the more someone explains, the less power they have. Real strength is quiet, confident, final. People respect men who speak with clarity, not with desperation. A man who constantly explains himself is secretly begging to be seen as good. But that need to be liked is exactly what makes him weak. Because strength doesn't need to be liked, it needs to be real. Machiavelli knew the game, never let them see you sweat. A strong man commands respect through actions, not endless chatter. Over-explaining hands your power away. You're giving others the chance to judge your worth. He is not leading, he's pleading. That's not a prince, that's a pawn. In a world where silence can carry more power than a paragraph, the man who over-explains has already lost the frame. His need to be liked exposes a deeper truth. He doesn't even like himself unless someone else does first. He reacts emotionally to everything. Weak men are controlled by their emotions, even if they try to hide it. Say something slightly offensive and they get defensive. Disagree with them and they take it personally. Ignore them and they spiral. Everything becomes a threat to their ego. It's not about being emotional, it's about being unstable. Their emotions control them. They can't handle rejection, embarrassment, or being wrong. They snap, argue, or break down. And in doing so, they show everyone around them one thing: they're easy to control. The world watches how men react. And once it sees a man can be triggered easily, he loses respect. Because anyone who can be provoked can also be manipulated. He becomes predictable. He becomes weak. You'll see this in public arguments, online debates, even small conversations. One comment is all it takes to throw him off. He'll lash out, explain too much, or emotionally retreat, and every reaction says the same thing: he has no control over himself. Now compare that to a strong man. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't react. He observes. He hears the same insult, the same rejection, the same tension, but he stays calm. Not because he's numb, but because he's disciplined. He knows silence can say more than words. He knows the person who keeps his composure holds the power. The weak man thinks reacting proves strength. But real strength is staying centered when everything tries to pull you off balance. Powerful men don't waste energy on every attack. They choose their response, and when they speak, people listen, because their control commands respect. Compulsive lying about achievements. Weak men lie, not to impress others, but to escape themselves. They create fake stories, exaggerate their success, and pretend to be more than they are. Not because they're ambitious, but because they're ashamed of how little they've actually done. They'll say they've made more money than they have. They'll talk about connections, skills, or experiences that don't exist. They'll twist small wins into grand victories. Why? Because deep down, they feel like nobodies. And instead of building real strength, they build fake images, hoping others will believe the lie long enough for them to feel better about themselves. But people can sense it. Fake confidence always leaks. The story sounds too polished, the energy doesn't match the words. And sooner or later, the truth surfaces, and with it comes embarrassment, loss of trust, and exposed weakness. What makes it worse is this: they don't lie to gain power, they lie to avoid shame. They fear being seen as average, or worse, invisible. So they dress up their emptiness in words, hoping no one looks too closely. But strong men don't do this. Strong men don't need to convince anyone. Their achievements speak for themselves, and even when they haven't reached their goals, they stay grounded in the truth. Because a man who owns where he is now builds real power in the future. Weak men live in fantasy. Strong men live in reality and shape it. Because respect isn't earned through fiction, it's earned through action. And when the lies fade, only one question remains: what has he actually built? Sabotaging others' success. There's a certain kind of man who doesn't know how to win, so he spends his life making sure no one else does either. He can't stand seeing someone rise, even if that person is a friend, especially if that person started at the same level, because every time someone else levels up, it reminds him of how stuck he is. And instead of using that as motivation, he turns bitter, quietly, secretly, constantly. He'll never say it out loud. He might even clap for others in public. But behind closed doors, he talks. He downplays their achievements, he highlights their flaws, he throws little comments to make others doubt them. Not because he cares about the truth, but because he can't stomach someone doing what he couldn't. This is the psychology of weak men. They view someone else's success as a personal insult. Instead of working harder, they try to bring others down to their level. Not with open attacks, but with subtle sabotage, a smile on the face, a knife in the back. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote that when a man cannot rise in power, he will try to disturb the rise of others, not because it helps him, but because it levels the field in his favor. And the most dangerous weak man is the one pretending to support you while quietly hoping you fail. You'll find this type everywhere. In friend groups, family, workplaces. They'll offer advice, but it always plants doubt. They'll act supportive, but never fully celebrate your win. They'll disappear when you're doing well and show up when you stumble. Strong men don't do this. They're not afraid of someone else shining because they're too focused on their own growth. They respect success even if it's not theirs, because they know what it takes to get there. They compete in action, not in envy. But weak men, they're in a silent war with everyone doing better than them, and most of the time, they've already lost. He can't be alone, so he performs. Some men are terrified of silence, not because it's boring, but because it reveals who they really are. They constantly surround themselves with people, distractions, and noise. They always need a group chat, a party, a call, something, anything, just to avoid being alone with their own mind. This is more than just a social habit. It's a form of escape, because when there's no one watching, no one validating, no one reacting, they feel empty. They don't know what to do when no one's paying attention, so they perform. They crack jokes they don't believe in. They post things online just to get a reaction. They mirror other people just to feel accepted, and in relationships this becomes a pattern of emotional neediness. They don't love, they attach. Not because they truly value the person, but because being alone scares them more than being in the wrong relationship. But deep down, they're disconnected from themselves. They haven't built an identity, they've built a mask. And that mask only works when someone's watching. Machiavelli would call this a man without an inner fortress. He believed that true power comes from within, from a place that cannot be shaken by outside forces. But a man who fears being alone has no fortress. He relies on the crowd for his sense of self. And when the crowd disappears, so does his confidence. This kind of weakness is dangerous, because the man who can't sit with himself will chase anything to avoid it. Attention, approval, noise. He'll say yes to things he doesn't want. He'll follow people he doesn't respect. He'll do whatever it takes just to avoid that quiet space where his truth lives. Strong men are the opposite. They disappear when needed. They unplug. They face their thoughts, their flaws, their silence, and they sharpen themselves in it. They don't fear being alone because that's where they build themselves. They return stronger, not weaker. Weak men avoid solitude. Strong men use it as a weapon. He confuses niceness with strength. There's a dangerous belief that being liked is the same as being respected. Weak men live by this belief. They avoid disagreement. They stay polite in every situation, and they let disrespect slide just to keep the peace. They think being nice makes them strong, but in reality, they're not being kind, they're being scared. These men say yes when they want to say no. They smile through discomfort. They agree just to avoid tension. And worst of all, they convince themselves that this is maturity, that they're above the drama. But deep down, everyone around them knows the truth. They're afraid of conflict, afraid of being disliked, afraid to stand up and say, no, that's not okay. So they become easy to walk over. In friendships, they allow jokes that go too far. In relationships, they stay silent when they're unhappy. At work, they accept less than they deserve. And slowly, without even noticing, they lose all sense of self-respect. Not because someone took it, but because they gave it away in exchange for approval. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Because love can fade, but fear creates boundaries. Weak men are terrified of creating boundaries. They think standing firm will make them look rude, aggressive, or cold. So they remain soft and slowly become invisible. Strong men are different. They don't chase approval. They don't fake kindness just to be accepted. They are respectful but clear. They can say no without guilt. They can walk away without explaining. They can hold a line and not flinch when others push against it. Being nice is not a weakness, but being nice because you're scared of conflict? That's not kindness, that's submission. And people can feel it. They know when a man is being polite from strength and when he's being polite out of fear. Weak men think strength is staying quiet to keep others comfortable. Strong men know real strength is standing firm, even when it makes others uncomfortable. He blames everyone but himself. There's a certain pattern that reveals weakness faster than anything else. When things go wrong, he always has someone else to blame. It was the boss, it was his childhood, it was the economy, it was the timing, it was his bad luck. He has an explanation for everything, except his own lack of action. This type of man is everywhere, and often, he doesn't even realize he's doing it. Because blame becomes a habit, a shield, something he hides behind every time life doesn't go his way. But here's the truth. A man who can't take responsibility for where he is can never change where he's going. Because in his mind, the problem is always out there. And if the problem is always outside him, then the solution will always be out of his control. He makes excuses constantly. No one's going to do it for you. No one's going to do it your way. I was going to start, but then I could have been great, but people didn't support me. These aren't just words, they're confessions. Not of failure, but of fear. Fear of trying and failing, fear of being exposed, a fear of admitting that he didn't do what needed to be done. Machiavelli believed that men must be willing to face harsh realities, that fortune only favors those who act, not those who wait for ideal conditions, and above all, that a man who blames fate is a man unfit to lead anything, including himself. You see, strong men fail too, but they don't hide from it. They say, yes, I messed up, I should have done more, I own this. And in doing that, they reclaim power. Because the moment you take full responsibility is the moment you become capable of change. Weak men fear that moment. So they live in denial, they rewrite the past, they keep themselves stuck, because growth would mean admitting they wasted time. A man addicted to blaming others is easy to spot. His life never improves, his stories never change, and when you really listen, it's clear he's not talking to you. He's trying to convince himself that it wasn't his fault, but deep down he knows. He just doesn't have the strength to say it out loud. Final summary. The mask always slips. Weakness isn't always loud. It doesn't always come in the form of collapse, failure, or defeat. Sometimes it hides behind a smile, behind over-explaining, behind fake confidence, behind the need to be liked. But in time, the mask always slips. The men we talked about today don't always look broken on the outside. Some of them are charming. Some are funny. Some are even successful on the surface. But what gives them away is how they behave under pressure. How they react when they're alone. What they do when someone else is rising faster. How often they lie, shrink, avoid, or pretend. That's what exposes a weak man. Not his status, but his behavior. One man explains himself to death, hoping people will approve. Another lies about his past because reality feels too small. One gets angry at every little thing. Another runs from all emotion entirely. One man claps when his friend wins, but inside, he hopes he fails. One can't sit in a room alone for 5 minutes without reaching for a distraction. One is nice to everyone, not because he's kind, but because he's scared to say what he really thinks. And the last one blames the world for everything he never had the courage to build. These are not just habits, they are signs. They are warning lights. They are proof that somewhere deep inside, a man is shrinking. Machiavelli didn't just study power, he studied human nature. He believed that weakness invites manipulation, and that strength, real strength, begins with how a man governs himself. Not how he looks, not how loud he is, but how he moves when no one is watching, how deeply rooted he is in who he is. Even if no one claps for him, that's what separates strong from weak. Not perfection, but presence. Not control over others, but control over self. Not performance, but principle. Because here's the hard truth. A weak man can't protect himself. Not from life, not from betrayal, not from his own thoughts. He breaks at the first sign of pressure. He chases validation instead of becoming valuable. He plays a role instead of building a foundation. But here's the good news. Every single behavior you just heard is reversible. Not easy, not overnight, but real strength begins the moment a man stops lying to himself. So here's the question that matters. Where do these behaviors live in your world? In people around you? In parts of yourself? Call it out, face it. Because power doesn't start with domination, it starts with clarity. And once a man becomes clear about his weakness, he becomes capable of becoming untouchable. If this exposed something real in others or in yourself, leave a mark below. Subscribe to Signal for more truths.